Clear prop.
Star 738, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear touch and go. 1 Charlie Bravo, exit in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and Designated Pilot Examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Fantastic. This is a unique episode, really kind of timely because I was supposed to fly yesterday to pick up my daughter, and she's a UT student, soon to be a graduate of UT, and the weather was a little bad. I let myself get out of currency, and I chose not to fly because while it was VFR, it was predicted and forecasted to be marginal halfway through my flight, and with the way the weather's been lately, I had no real hope that it would be anything otherwise than IFR when I got back, so I chose not to go. Obviously, I think that's a good decision, but like every other decision, you're sitting watching, and the clouds clear as can be 3 hours after I should have left, and my wife ended up driving to pick her up and bring her home, and lo and behold, it's pretty outside, right? So maybe I could have got away with it, but I think I made the best decision. But let's talk about instrument flying some today. I let myself get out of currency. I own a flight school. There's plenty of ways to stay current. I got plenty of friends that are CFIs. I could have and should have stayed current. In Houston, this time of year, man, it's December, the middle of December right now, and the dew point and temperature spread are almost always the same for the first 3 hours of the day. Lots of fog around here, lots of moisture in the air, lots of potential for quick accumulation of clouds and low visibility. Obviously we should stay current shooting our approaches and stuff, but what are some of the things that we can talk about and maybe help the listeners think about as it relates to instrument flying and things that they should stay up with? You gave me my instrument check ride. We have a very popular show from the early days of this podcast reflecting on that instrument check ride, and I'd be lying if I sat here and said I remember everything we talked about that day, because some of those things go away. I know when I should file an alternate, but let's just shoot the buzz back and forth around instrument flying, or maybe what the listeners should be thinking about this time of year, no matter where they're at.
Well, one thing I do pretty much at the end of every check ride, after all the paperwork has been signed and the handshakes have been given and all that stuff, is I will say to the applicant or the newly minted certified pilot, I will say, now what? And usually they'll say, well, it's on to the next rating or whatever. So, a lot of my applicants are people who aspire to have a career in aviation. But a lot of them are I won't say a lot of them, but some of them are the 50-year-old who now has the time and the resources to get their pilot certificate or their instrument rating or whatever it is. And so with instrument people, that we, of course, during the ground portion of the check ride, we talk about currency, and they talk about 6 approaches and 6 calendar months and all that. And I tell them that, that's really hard to do. Unless you are consciously going out there and putting the hood on and getting a safety pilot, 6 approaches in 6 months is not something that's just easily attainable, especially maybe in the summer, because around here, at least in the summer, if we have bad weather, it's probably thunderstormy,
Yep.
and these kind of airplanes we probably shouldn't be flying anyway. So it's not just something that just is easy to do. You sit there and you go, well, gee, that's only 1 approach a month. Well, 2 months pass by, and now you're way behind the power curve. So one thing I suggest to people, and this is to the person who is not going on for the next rating, but I say, you know what? Maybe every 3 months, schedule a flight with an instrument instructor. And if that instrument instructor feels that you're in a good position, have them sign you off for an instrument proficiency check every 3 months, every 4 months. Why not? It resets your clock for another 6 months, and it gives you a little bit of time with an instructor. And I think it's good training, looking at maybe different approaches that you might not normally do. The other thing is the person who is now moving on to their commercial certificate, they just totally forget the instrument stuff, and then they go out and they start working on chandelles and lazy eights. Instrument flying is a skill that erodes
Quickly.
and as a younger pilot, and when I say younger, I'm not just talking about age, but as a less experienced pilot, the instrument skills erode in a hurry. And of all the skills that are involved in flying, I would say instrument flying is the one that slips away quicker than anything else.
Yeah, and there's something that I struggle with, I think, and it's holding myself accountable to proficiency. I would say over the last 4 years or so, being an instrument-rated pilot, I've done some real instrument flying, and I've done some real approaches in weather, nowhere near to minimums probably, but that's based on my personal minimums. But I've flown in the clouds alone. I've flown in it with passengers. I'm not afraid of it. But what happens, I think, is as I got less proficient, the normalcy of flying got a little bit eroded, right? And so then I shot some approaches in the sim to stay legal, and they were probably 2 approaches within a 50-mile radius of this place. So it was probably the VOR Alpha 3 times. It was probably Conroe 3 times. I did a hold out at the VOR Alpha, and I did some tracking between. But was that really keeping me current and proficient? Probably not. Some of those numbers are memorized. I would not be able to pull up an approach in Aspen and shoot it as proficiently as I could the VOR Alpha approach in Navasota. And so I started getting worried that I was letting myself get more unproficient, right? So all I did was shoot these 2 approaches. I didn't even want to fly, even being legally current. I didn't want to fly to Austin in the clouds, and I made the choice to drive a couple times in the past. And quite literally in the last year, I've been working so hard on building the flight school that I have not flown enough to feel really good at all yesterday. Current or not, I probably wouldn't have flown and made that decision, because I felt like I had let it erode so much. And I have proactively made the decision I will take and get an IPC soon. And I feel like I need to go through that work of studying and getting ready almost for a check ride again,
right,
to feel confident that I'm going to be able to take my family and fly through the clouds and want to be able to shoot an approach to minimums and feel good about it without even an autopilot if I'm ever put in that situation, right? You've talked about it a lot. We've talked about it a lot. I should shoot an approach with only my iPad a few times to feel really confident that I can load it and shoot it. And while that's not the legal way of doing it, what if it is an emergency and I have to use that as a last resort? I definitely want to practice with a safety pilot a couple times. And I have no excuses because I got people around here and planes around here all the time. I should stay proficient and be able to do that. One of the things that I think about as we talk about these things eroding, I remember the day of our check ride, and I'm looking at the map right now because I forgot the VOR name, but we were heading out towards Day Zeta. You'll maybe not remember. We were heading east for something you had told me to prepare for, and I think you told me to hold on the 260 radial 10 miles west of Day Zeta, and I could do that in a plane with a GPS but no fancy whiz-bang equipment. I could do that. I don't know that I could do that today. I don't know that I could enter it, stay on the right side of the hold, be proficient, hold altitude, and that's what I'm talking about. Like,
right.
Can I wing it? Sure, but not in turbulence, not in night IFR, right? Like, there's a big swath of what we're talking about here.
Right.
Being able to do it in a sim repetitively, and then being able to do it when an air traffic controller says, I need you to do this, I need you to do it now, and I need you to stay at 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
And I don't think we could do it any other way than either being a professional pilot and doing it in our day job, or like you said, staying really current, flying with an instructor, doing it every few months, and sticking to those requirements that would be more like an IPC or a check ride.
Right. And, another thing to think about is I was very fortunate or very unfortunate, depends on how you look at it, but when I was coming up as a pilot, I know I had 3 vacuum pump failures before I got my instrument rating, just flying just VFR. So I was actually fairly competent in flying an airplane without the vacuum system working, because it happened to me 3 times. One time was at night, and
In VFR conditions.
oh yeah, all VMC conditions. But as I was an instrument instructor, because of those experiences that I had, I say that 50% of my students had the vacuum instruments covered up. I mean, 50% of their instrument time was partial panel. It was something I harped on. Now, are vacuum pump failures becoming less of an issue based on the technology we have in the airplanes? They are, because heck, a lot of the airplanes that we fly don't even have a vacuum system. So just the math tells you that it is less of an issue. But from that standpoint, when you get an instrument rating, it doesn't say G1000 only or non-vacuum systems only. So it presents an issue of if you do fly a nice well-equipped airplane with a G1000 all the time, but then one day you need to go somewhere and the only airplane available is an old steam gauge airplane, and you hop in it and go, well, you do have that chance of a vacuum pump failure. And you just mentioned to me something about a little bit of a rash of vacuum pump failures. Why don't you hit on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think in the last 60 days, we've replaced 3 or 4 vacuum pumps. One was a warranty, so probably not related to the current temperature and environment, but my mechanic says, look, this is the time of year we're going to lose some vacuum pumps. We're going to have some battery issues. We're going to have some strut things happen. And that's all just because of the temperature change. This is Houston, Texas. I literally froze to death last Saturday watching my son play golf. The day before that, I was sweating playing in shorts. And the day after that, the temperature was 36 when the round started, and it was 76 when the round ended. Like, planes, rubber, strut seals, batteries, they don't like that, right? And so the vacuum pump failures that we've had, my mechanic attributes to weather. It's the temperature change, and the rubber and the ceramic and some of those pieces that are in there probably don't do well in those changing temperatures. So be advised that it's more likely than not right now. And this is also I don't know that it's necessarily related, but something that I think a lot about is this is ideal conditions for carb ice, sorry. And if we don't fly a carbureted engine on a regular basis, and we fly maybe an S model with fuel injectors, it might be something to really think about, that all the moisture in the air, 55 degrees outside, lots of power and touch and goes. You should be thinking, pull carb ice if I feel any roughness whatsoever, or carb heat. Sorry, I've inverted those twice now. Pull the carb heat if I feel any roughness in that engine right now, because there can't be, Houston, Texas right now, there can't be a better time for that carb ice to be created. And even if it's not freezing, that carb ice could really form quickly with almost 100% humidity in the air, right?
Right.
So there's a lot going against us, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I don't think, as a young pilot, I realized it. I probably still aren't really aware of all the dangers. But as a flight school owner, and the way that my chief and I have worked to make it a safe place to fly, there's all kinds of rules we've implemented that make me think about this more than I would have as a young pilot. Another thing that we enforce around here is a temperature dew point spread that is 1,000% in place to protect students. And I had a recent opportunity flying with a student that asked to go fly for fun. We took off. I was current at this time, and it was nice outside. But once we got in the air, there was this, I'll call it 1,000 foot layer of low visibility, right? And it was, the temperature and the dew point were the same. Call it 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet. and the air had become saturated with water, which is what? It's fog. It could be very thick or could be somewhat thin, but we probably had about a mile visibility, and at 100 knots, looking through 40 miles of that stuff, you can't see anything. You could get very disoriented really, really quick. And I think student pilots see what's happening on the surface, and they look up, and it looks nice, a mile above them, and they want to go, and they don't realize how much visibility can be lost on that longer view across the sky if the temperature and dew point spread are really close to each other. And they always say, well, it's 4 degrees, your rules are 4 degrees. And I'm like, yes, but what happens when you climb to 2,000 feet, Wally?
4 degrees.
4 degrees. So just above us, less than a half a mile above us, we're assuming, the math says, the books say, the temperature and the dew point are exactly the same, which does what? It creates moisture in the air that's saturated, and there we go. We got some layer of fog or lower visibility, and that's not good for a student cross country for sure, right? So the rules are there to protect the students, and I just don't think younger pilots know all that yet. We've just not been exposed to those things, or maybe even experienced them. So I'm on heightened awareness right now, and those things could get you for sure.
Yeah. I jokingly say this with a lot of applicants. I say, "What's our goal today?" And a lot of times they'll say, "Well, for me to pass a check ride." And I go, "Yeah, well, that's our secondary goal, but what is our primary goal?" Primary goal is not to die.
Yep.
Okay, and that's kind of in your face to say that, but that is the goal. When we get in an airplane, I mean, we want to go from point A to point B. But if we can't make it to point B, we want to get back to point A and not die. And with instrument flying, if someone goes out there and they can't do a turnabout a point, or they're struggling with a chandelle or a lazy 8, it's probably not going to cause you to die. But if you go out there and you cannot safely fly instrument conditions, if you get, you're prone to getting disoriented and not trusting your instruments, it could make you die.
One other thing that I think a lot about is the way we practice or the way we operate, not related necessarily to the school, but us as pilots. So you said it earlier, instrument student passes an instrument check ride. The next day, they've probably got their first commercial lesson, and they can't wait to see what it's like to do lazy 8s or chandelles, and they can't, 8s around pylons. They've heard about this pivotal altitude. They want to get into all that stuff, right? And what I found was I forgot everything about sectionals, by the way, when I started working on my commercial. And the same thing's going to happen when they try to go back to instrument stuff in general. They're gonna have some weak points. But a lot of commercial students want to build time. And so they want to build time together, and there's signs in the kitchen here for safety pilots, and let's go one wear a hood and fly so that we can both get some PIC time, which is completely legal. But how much of that do you think is real work, Wally? How many of those students that are flying for 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon, how much work do you think they're putting in? Do you think they're challenging each other and, track this VOR, do this hold over this, here's a partial panel exercise, put the G1000 partial panel up? Or do you think it's more like just shooting the breeze flying across country? And I'm not indicting anyone. I've been a part of all of it. But
right.
The reality is I guess I'm saying I'm challenging you all to do it a little bit more difficultly while you're flying with your safety pilot or as a safety pilot. Don't just be the lookout. Make it stressful. Do some unusual attitudes. It's not impossible for two friends that are flying together to have one have the hood on and one of them say, "Put your head down for a minute. I'm gonna wiggle the tail a little bit and get you a little disoriented and see if you can still recover." Because you surely don't want the first time you've seen that since your check ride to be the time you're really upside down in the clouds.
Yeah, and I definitely encourage that while you're doing some instrument training, to fly with a safety pilot, someone other than your instructor over there. I see a lot of logbooks where 100% of the instrument time is with an instructor in the right seat. And I know I used to practice a lot of things. I mean, I would go out and fly approaches by myself, obviously not under the hood, but just in VM, without the hood. I would go out and tell approach, hey, I'd like vectors for the VOR or the ILS, and back in the day it was the NDB approach, and I would do it, without. Obviously, I'm by myself, so I can't be under the hood. But one thing that I, probably the one of the things that I'm most critical of on instrument check rides is people overcorrecting. You're coming down a GPS or an ILS approach, and you're just zigzagging down final trying to chase that needle. And I think it's because you've been under the hood so much that you don't realize that on a 6-mile final, 1 dot deflection on ILS is not that far off.
Yeah,
you don't need to
feet.
make you don't have to make a 30-degree correction to go get that needle. It's just a very small correction. And once you do this in VMC conditions and you're looking at the runway, you kind of learn that, hey, this is just a very small correction. So I challenge you to get out and fly by yourself or fly with a safety pilot and maybe put yourself under the hood. But fly these approaches without the hood on.
Yeah, the original owner, Bob Watts, was a great mentor, still is. He's doing some stuff around here again for us. Love having him around. He told me after I bought the flight school from him, I don't know what we were talking about, but I'll never forget it, and I never don't do it. He gave me this advice. He says, if you have the chance to shoot an approach, you shoot that approach every time, no matter what.
Right.
He said, if you file IFR in a pretty sunny day to go to Austin to pick up your daughter, and you don't have to cancel it halfway there, don't cancel it. Request the RNAV, shoot the RNAV, get better. Always be working at getting better. And I take that to heed. If I fly to Austin now, even on a clear day, I ask for that RNAV approach, and I fly 5 or 10 more minutes and go out and shoot it and intercept it and track it down, because I sure do want to have that mental picture in my brain of what it looked like coming across that freeway at about 300 feet, which are the minimums on that in the G1000, and know what I'm supposed to see so that I feel what it's going to look like when I pop out of those clouds one day when I do it to minimums.
Yeah.
And I think you should do that as pilots as well. Don't rush. Don't take the visual if you don't have to. Shoot those approaches either on a clear day or a cloudy day with your instructor or a pilot that is capable of doing that with you.
Well, I mean, I'll use the sports analogy. I do this a lot, but if it's the end of the game, you've scored a touchdown to bring the game within 2 points, and you need a 2-point conversion to tie the game to send it into overtime. It would really be nice if 2 days ago you had run this play in practice
many times.
Yeah, hey, we're gonna do this play. Oh yeah, we just ran that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not one that we did that back in training camp in August. Let me see. Yeah, where do I line up for this play?
Yep. The other thing that I think goes a little unused in practical use cases is the simulator at this flight school, and I'm sure you can find a simulator or just install some software at home and get used to your scan and practicing and failing instruments. The full motion simulator at this flight school is a great tool to go into alone or with an instructor or a friend to sit there and use the instructor station and start failing some instruments. You want to know, everyone has participated in partial panel, but it's instantaneous partial panel is what I like to say, right? You put something, you actually see the DPE reaching over, putting it over your attitude indicator and says, good luck, shoot the approach. Well, that's failed.
Right.
You're being told that's
right.
failed. You don't even have to know that's a vacuum system.
Yeah.
Because it's already failed. You don't have to know why it failed. You just know it failed. Go into the simulator, tell the simulator, fail my vacuum system somewhere between 5 and 30 minutes from now, and you fly in the soup for that 25 minutes that you gave that window of opportunity to, and I guarantee you will get off your track, off your line, change altitudes, because even though you know it's coming, you won't realize that that's slowly degrading, right?
Right.
That heading indicator that may be slaved to not slave, sorry, might not be slaved, is slowly progressing. And that attitude indicator just slowly rolls.
Yeah.
And then if you really want to get crazy, tell the turn coordinator to go with it at some point in that time frame. Turn coordinator starts going one way, attitude one way. Your mind's going to be blown. And if you don't cross scan, you're going to be shocked at how that really feels in real life. And much like Wally just used the example of a 2-point conversion, sure would be nice if you practice that a few times, slowly degrading, than it really happening to you in the clouds when that's what you're depending on.
Right.
My instrument instructor one time slowly failed everything, including my engine, in the clouds, and all I had was that compass, and I was making the smallest adjustments possible. And sure enough, we popped out of the clouds. My wings were level, and luckily there was a field right in front of us, right? And I can say I've at least done it once. I hope that never happens to me where all I've got left is a compass. But you practice is, I guess, the scenario here, and then make good decisions to avoid it. I can't stress that enough. And I think sometimes people say I might be overly cautious, but it's a classic saying. I'd much rather be down here wishing I was up there than up there wishing I was down here.
Yeah, that's the going back to the vacuum pump failure. That is the one thing that in the airplane we really can't simulate. We can't simulate a true vacuum pump failure. Yeah, we can cover up the instruments and fly without them, but the real key is recognizing that is in fact what's happened. I mean, in big airplanes, one thing that we practice a lot is decompressions, and we always say that an explosive decompression is actually going to be a lot easier than a slow leak, because you know what it is. You know that you've had a decompression. You're going to get the oxygen on. You're going to go down. But if you have a slow leak, and there have been many deaths, that's what the great golfer Payne Stewart. That's probably what led to his death, was a slow leak in a pressurization system in a Learjet, and they probably didn't recognize it. And by the time, they probably just went to sleep. And that was the end
he was
of it.
coming. He was coming right here. I was a young man at the time. I was devastated by that, just not understanding how that could happen, and seeing that plane ultimately run out of fuel somewhere in Illinois and go down was tragic for sure.
Yeah.
And since then, having the opportunity to fly in some jets, I've asked a lot of questions about the pressurization and oxygen system. They've come a long way since that was probably 93 or 4, something like that.
Yeah.
They have come a long way. I guess other things that we should stay proficient at as instrument pilots or be thinking about are really some of the I'll call them regulations. I think like I mentioned, I know when to file an alternate, and I file an alternate when I'm proficient and current, and I fly IMC. It's the other things that I think maybe go away a little bit. What should I do if I lost my comms? I think we should practice that as well, right?
Yeah.
I think climbing and confessing might be obvious, but if you're on an IFR flight plan and you lose your comms, climbing and confessing is not going to be the right thing to do in every circumstance. And
Right.
we have to know what really is the right thing to do, because people are expecting us to do things.
Right.
And if we don't do those things, we can get in a lot of sketchy situations pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then I think, as I think about it, and all I've learned over the last 6 or 7 years of flying, there are so many rules to protect us. And so what is an MEA really providing for me? What kind of protection is it providing for me? Do I know what my minimum en route altitude is? And am I sure that it's going to keep me safe? And have I done the due diligence to really think through that flight plan? I think I won't say we, I'll say I think I have gotten lazy over the years at times and said, I know this route. I fly it all the time. I'm going to Syntex. I'm going via Shiner. I know how to do this route. I know the altitudes, but I've never done it with lost comms. I've never done it with a rough running engine. I've never done it with ice forming on the wings. And I think any of those extra stressors could really make it show that I'm not a proficient instrument pilot, even if I think I am.
Right.
And that kills people. There's no question it does.
Yeah, it does.
Anything you want to wrap up with, Wally?
No, just Get proficient.
Get proficient, stay safe. If you are going to take a check ride with a DPE in the Houston area, and their name happens to be Wally, tell your friends, listen to the podcast. They might learn a few things and get some help before they even get there and meet Wally for the first time. As always, fly safe and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.